Welcome, everyone. I think we will start just a minute early and let's wait for everyone to join just for a minute. Think let's start because it's been an afternoon now. So a lot of you maybe after the second cup of coffee or already after a lot of talks that have been during the summit. I've been on some of them. So really nice conference that was put together with all of the rock stars in the testing community. So we have right in time and let's start. First of all, would like just to say a couple of words about myself. So I've been working right now as a consultant automation QA engineer. Recently got certified as advanced technical tester from the ICTQB. Main focus is framework building, rescuer, also doing the task planning strategies for the clients whenever joining the teams, looking into all of the possibilities for the testing community as well. Being as a QA lead and mentor for some of the QAs within my team right now. As a personal one, I'm an active whippet owner or the dog owner. So I've been an active person quite often, and I am a massive bookworm. So if you're on a Goodreads, find me up and we can be friends and share some interesting books around. So let's start. A quick introduction was over us. Today's the topic that I chose is the Cypress or Playwright, who cares? So if you open LinkedIn or any other QA blogs, there's so many talks about whether it is still Cypress or are we stopped using Cypress and now we switch all to the Playwright, or where is Selenium gone? So as a QA engineers, we love arguing about our tools, what we are using, what we prefer better. In this presentation, I'm trying to answer the question that it doesn't matter. The whole discussion, it doesn't actually make sense because the only one is to have a good architecture that will help you to build the lifelong framework that doesn't actually care whether you're using Cypress or Playwright or Selenium or any next tool that will be popular in a few years. So we will be switching a little bit of our mindset today from just writing scripts into actually becoming a software engineers. That I hope try to put that mindset together to you. First of all, does the timeline look familiar to you? In 2010, we had Selenium. The Selenium was old. We all started using Cypress. Then the Playwright hit the market. We all stopped using Cypress. We switched to Playwright. So how many years do we have until the Playwright will be in old news? And maybe if you're following the community, maybe Vbium will be the next one in line for everyone to be using. So the reality is that normally we do not test, because I've been so many times on migrating from one tool into another and just switching context, that it is just a waste of time. So be endlessly rewriting the tests for our tools. So what we are trying to will change that today is to make it easier for us, make it easier for us as a testers to follow up with the new technologies that's rising. The aha moment was when I realized that developers don't actually write code this way. If developers switch database providers, they don't rewrite the entire UI. They just change the database connector. So why don't we treat our automation tool as just like a database connector? Why shouldn't we just build a framework so resilient that swapping from one tool into another won't be a problem for us at all? So, what I came up is to look into our framework more as analogy to universal remote. Because whenever someone using a remote for it to be, it doesn't care whether it's Samsung or LG or Sony, you have a remote that translates any command into specific TV. So that's how we need to treat our framework as well. We need to treat it that as a universal remote. Your test says click login, and you shouldn't care if it's Cypress or Playwright executing it. The framework translates it by themselves. So we shift from being into syntaxes to being more as a tool agnostic framework that we'll be using. Before that, I was thinking through some experiences that was joining and looking through the frameworks that was written and needed to rewrite it to make it more maintainable and better, and wanted to list some of the no lists that those tips quite oftenly we see them and we do them and we repeat them. So I hope just to remind why those are kind of like the killers of a good testing framework creation. First of all, I would say that's one as a hope and pray. And I've seen so many times when we put a wait and we sit and hope that that page will load in 5 milliseconds. Okay, so we put 5 seconds sleep in the code. Imagine you have 2,000 tests. Each will wait for 5 seconds. That will prolong the pipeline and your feedback loop so long that you will already finish your work on Friday and you still won't get the results there. So what instead we use dynamic weights, we use API polling, we use state checks as well. So hard-coded sleeps, they kind of like a cancer to our framework. Would use those drastic words as well. The second one will be a house of cards, which is the dependency on the test. So, for example, imagine you have a test where you create a user, then you log in with that user, and the third test, you test the functionality of deleting this user. What will happen if the user won't be created? All of the three tests will fail. The debugging will take you a lot of time to understand why those parts has failed as well. So what the main focus on any test that you're writing in the automation to be isolated. So they can run in any order you would like, and you will still have the test results. So they can run in parallel or they can run in random order. They are not dependent on each other. So you have just the stateless behind by one before. The third one is the scenic route. I would associate it whenever you go to the mountains and you want to see that top of the mountain, which contains the add to cart button. And you go all the way down for that mountain, but instead you can run the helicopter and you can just drop on the top of the mountain. That's the scientific route. So sometimes I've seen so many times when people are using navigation from one page to another, to another, to another, just to check that the button is there. We need to use the backend APIs or database seedings to inject the states just directly and go straight to the page where you need to check your elements on. So doing the data setups will firstly decrease the time that you will need to do in order to check your test, and it also will decrease the flakiness of your test while running the automation. And probably not to bore you, because I know all of you have been maybe in testing and you have seen so many results of the no list that we can continue on that. But I think the last one that I want to really pay attention to is the Boolean blindness. If you look in the code that provided, we have create admin user John, true, false, true. What does true, false, true mean? No one knows. I need to go in and check what those arguments stands for. So every test that you are writing shouldn't be a riddle. It should be read as a story. It should be clear. It should be descriptive. So instead of true, false, true, you can easily create a method, create admin with expired license, or any other needs that you will need to specify. So I know exactly what those tests are about, what are they testing, and just the whole business logic. I use those steps and those no list during the PRs when we are reviewing the PR, and I highly recommend to bear them in mind as well if you happen to chance to review the PRs or even create your own. So the next slide, look at the top snippet. The spaghetti effect. It is actually ugly. It's fragile. It has a lot. If something changed, for example, in the locator, our test will fail completely. And imagine that you will reuse those locators in a couple of hundred other times. So by changing one locator doesn't actually mean anything, because you will fix one test, but all of the rest will be still failing. So on below, this is the snippet that I prepared. I created the framework just as a proof of concept for a clear architecture state that later on I will share the QR code with you, and you can go and check it out by yourselves. This is the snippet from what I've created. It is clear, it is readable. You can clearly see what the test is about, and the most important part, you don't see Playwright in here. You don't see Cypress, you haven't seen any Psycho or await. We have the await, but this is full functionality. But this is where we start talking about the clear architecture. So where all of those Playwright and Cypress go, it's the magic, where the magic happens. It all went to the wrapper SOSA. So we created a dedicated modular for the core layer. If we say, this is the snippet of that wrapper that you will see. So with the specification to separate the test and separate our Playwright or Cypress or Selenium code, what I used here, first of all, I tried not to create the God object when you have only one file that contains all of the logic, all of the steps that you need to follow, because that will be enormous. Imagine looking through 5,000 steps just to find the one that you need to use for your test. So that's what I try to separate them into page or forms, elements. We have asserts as well, and we have data and browser. This is just an example. You can increase however you want. It all depends on the type of application that you are testing. Those snippets are just from the core POC that I created, just to have as every UI web page components normally have, like menu, navigation, data, and elements. So instead, we split that magic. So we split that wrapper, not to have it in one file, but we split it into several files. So now we know that in browser, we have the code and we have the logic that lives for navigation, tabs, or Windows management. In Elements, we have clicking, typing, drop-down, selections, checkboxes, whatever you need with the elements as well. Assertions will contain our visibility, and network intercepts or API payloads. We put everything in the data TS. So the facade, why we are using the UI client as the class, because it actually ties that all together. So now whenever you are writing the test case, what you will do is you will just type UI page and autofill the steps that you need to use during your test. For example, like verify that the new tab is open. That will create a readiness and clearness in your test, which help you out also to understand what they are testing and where exactly we are. In migration, when you need to migrate from Playwright to another new tool, that will happen. This is the only file that will give you the leads where you need to change the context, because you see you have pages, forms, and elements. All of those that's listed in the pages, that is where your code lives. So, by changing the syntax of the scripting language, that only take you to change those files that are listed here. And that's all. All of the tests, all of the business logic will stay the same. So instead of using 2 months or even more on rewriting the whole framework, you will only need to rewrite the reusable steps that we defined. I would say in my head, it looks a little bit like Lord of the Rings, the one that rules them all. So yeah. So if we go down into the places, or I really like the saying, a place for everything and everything in its place, which helps you so much in structuring your framework to be in exactly places where you need to search for. So this is just a proposed proof of concept for the clean architecture, designed to completely decouple the test intent from the execution tool. So it is not tied to Playwright, it is not tied to Cypress or any other framework. On the left, we see the project structure. So we created the source. This is the source. This is the core where our framework lives. And then we have test data and tests that are completely separate from the framework. Then, for example, in core, this is where those pages and the steps lives for. If you need to verify or navigation, clicking of the buttons on the checklists. Then we have pages where I normally store the metadata of the page. So it's basically the URLs that you need for your testing. Then we have the business logic, which are steps. And we have some selectors, CSS attributes. So we have the locators. I prefer also to separate them based on the page. If, of course, you have, for example, components that are reusable during the whole web UI application, you can store it in one file and complete like reusable components. This one is really handy because whenever anything changes on the UI or some new attributes is added, you just need to change this one file and that's all. Then we also have states, which in the task data that normally restore the JSON files or the fixtures. Please bear in mind, no hard-coded data in here. And then we have test. This is where the actual specs lives. they're readable, they are business understandable. They are understandable not only for you, but also for the junior QAs, for the business owners, for product owners, whenever wanted to check out, they navigate the test and they search for. I missed that. I'm not missed here, but we also in steps you can use Gherkin language. As much as I love Gherkin language, and I feel it's really good to be using them. I tried to move a little bit from the Gherkin language in this specific framework context. It adds additional way of translation. However, if you name your functions steps in more plain language, you can see that the Gherkin is not a very must. It all depends on your team, how you feel, and whether you would like to work in the Gherkin or stay more like a function rate. So, all right, let's move a little bit. We talked about the theory, we talked about how it all was designed. Now I tried to put in some snippets of the code that was written for. So let's have a little bit of looking on the top where we have the core wrapper classes. This is examples of assertions that you would use. This is the quarantine zone. This is the only place where you will see this page locator to be visible. Or I added as well some examples for the Cypress that you can use instead. For example, should be visible, same language. But this is the only place where you will see Playwright or Cypress syntaxes or even Selenium syntaxes, whatever you would like to use. Then we have locators and pages. Notice that there's completely missing. There's no actions. There's no imports from Playwright. Locators is just pure string. It's a dictionary, and pages, they just holds the URLs and API endpoints, wherever you will need for your test. So it is just a string and dictionary of what you are using in order to use for a test. And finally, we have tests themselves. So these are the actual test files your QA team will write every single day. And if you look closer, those tests, they don't have any CSS selectors, they don't have any page locator, anything like that. You just see the steps like verify, login success. So the tests are completely clear and understandable what we are testing and what is the aim and assertions of those tests. So it is completely immune to tool migration, and I feel that this is like the future proof for the automation that should be looking like. If we go a little bit further down the line, I think I tried to recollect some of the war stories, some war stories that was actually really hard to live through. First, it was the UA tornado. If you're working with the UI and if you're working with testing of the UI applications, you have the Tailwind CSS. And knowing the Tailwind CSS, it changes every single class on the DOM. So imagine that you will have the spaghetti framework where all of the classes are just like shattered down in every test. Will be a complete nightmare. You will spend, instead of testing and instead of actually doing the test, you will just spend time in rewriting everything. So with the approach that we have before, whenever we have the single place where our CSS locators lives, we only need to rewrite those files. We run them and the test will be passing through, because the locators, we know that those tests are completely independent from what we have in our core folder. Um, then, so the results that we actually just updated that and we were ready. I don't know, maybe it was like 2.5 days that we were ready to run after we're running all of the tests. The another one, I think it's quite often spotted, is the tool swap when the management demands that now the Cypress is not actually a buzzing thing. We want the Playwright to be. And joining the project where the test is just created as it test, and then you have the same steps repeated all over again. Rewriting such frameworks, it's just a nightmare for every test automation engineer. You will spend so many months to do that. With using the right architecture, when we write from the start, you will just need to rewrite those pages where your actually syntax lives in and the UI, and all of the rest of the test will be completely the same. So it is, we didn't have to rewrite the whole framework. We just needed to rewrite the translator, which was our wrapper. And this is why you build the architecture from the day one. The moment you start building the framework that actually is understandable, where it's the place for everything is places. In the future concept, it's so much easier to understand, and it's so much easier to maintain such frameworks itself. So I put a little bit together the ultimate checklist, what is don'ts and do's during the writing of the framework. First, it's the tool to keep the tool out of the test. So we do not include page click or scikit inside the test files. We take them out. We make our test readable as the plain English. It again doesn't matter whether you are using Gherkin language or you're just using the functionality or the naming of the functions. Still, it should be clear and readable. Then we hide the ugly HTML. We do not put any HTML selectors on the test. Imagine that you will look in the test and saying, oh, press on NTH semicolon 2. What does an NTH semicolon 2 means? In comparison, you will say press on the second row of the table. That's what I understood. I know where the tests are failing. I know where exactly on the UI I need to search whether there's some changes on the UI or maybe our tests, the selectors are changed or the priorities. So it should be clearly understood for you as well. Then no hard-coded secrets. We never pressed in some passwords or users. We always use the external JSON files or yeah, we just update on the one file. And so sometimes we can use, for example, in keyword-driven development or in data-driven development, we use Excel files to facilitate the names of the users where you can create hooks. And each of the hook will be corresponding to the separate user type together with a password. Or also with the hooks, you can just manipulate the state of your application that you're already logged in with the permissions or roles that you need, which will be one of the best solution, I would say. But it as well always depends. And then we have that you need to always use the concept of the universal remote. This is the mindset that we all need to put together whenever we create a framework. We don't think about the current project that we are developing, but we are also trying to think for the future. What in the future might change, not only within the application, but also with the tools as well. Whether we will stay on the project or we will move to some other companies, still it is our good quality and our face when we create a framework that after us, some junior developers or other developers, QA engineers will look in the framework and understand everything, and the rewriting will take them only a week. That takes a lot from the beginning, but it actually pays off at the end. Yeah. So that one, I think, went through. Trying to keep it quite not too boring. So we have the QA session now, but on the screen right now, you will have you have a QR code. If you will scan it, it will give you direction to the GitHub repository that we went through, that you had the screenshots for. You can go through, you can look through what created, you can download it or use it as just an example. Never say it's a strictly you need to follow these rules, but I know from the experience that such architecture of the framework actually pays off in very long runs. So if you try to maybe tomorrow or on a Monday morning, if you try to a little bit start rewriting the test and separating it from the whole structure, I think it will be really changing in your mindsets. Instead of just writing Cypress, we'll be actually software engineers that will be creating it. So treat your test code with respect, with design patterns and standards that normally developers or software architects will do. By maybe not everyone, but I read some of the software architecture principles for the developers that opens mind a lot into how to create a good framework that will last. And yeah, this is for today. I think we have the first question. How do you design a framework so that the changing the automation tool doesn't require rewriting the entire test suite? I think this is where I answered it. It's creation of the wrapper. It's creation of the one place where you store everything within your syntaxes, and then you don't need to rewrite the tests at all. I think we will have the next. Which architectural principles helps the most in keeping framework maintainable over the years? I think we went through them quite a bit. So first of all, it's a clear understanding of the functions, what those functions do, then isolations, which will be the isolation of each test completely by themselves. We also do not include, whenever you have a step, for example, verify the admin login, you don't do the assertions there. I would keep separately assertions completely separate from the actions that you need to do within the test. So each step corresponds to each isolated part, what you do and what you assert. Keeping isolation is the one way that will keep the whole framework maintainable. I always had the naming when for the unit tests. I know if, it's mainly for the unit, but if fast, which is so first. So we have that is fast, it's isolated, it's rigorous, it's self-resilient, and it's thorough. So I try to keep it in mind even for the automation test that we are writing as well, not only for the unit test. Yeah, think next. Have you thought about abstracting your framework even further? Yes, thank you for the question. In I thought about that and I wrote. So the more abstraction will be using interfaces. And I wrote the interfaces, which will completely more isolate your framework from the test itself. However, isolate giving the interfaces to the framework will create a little bit for, not in particular for this presentation, a visual effect of a big framework, kind of like a Java mighty. It's better, it's more reusable, but sometimes it might be a little bit more, I would say, scary to the people that never created the frameworks from scratch. Um, for that QR code in the GitHub, in the README, I did include why the interfaces were excluded and how to add them, as well as for the gherkin. If someone would like to install the gherkin, you can go through the README file. But yeah, abstracting is even further. So no more questions. Thank you so much for joining and for listening. And I really hope that the mindset that I'm trying to put in with maintaining will help you out. And yeah.